Hi there! Welcome back to another video on my channel. Today it is so hot they got me out here in my hoochie mama dress just for you guys. Yeah, it is super hot out here. Oh my god. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about something that was like still I don't know if it's cold tea. I think it's still kind of happening, but I feel like everybody and their mama has made a video on this. I wanted to do my own, but not so much in the drama-esque sense. Although I will be filling you guys in the general sense of what's going on. But I just wanted to use this drama situation as like a case study for something I've been noticing sometimes in like the indie author spaces. So if you don't know, I'm going to be talking about Audra Winters and her recent release, The Age of Scorpius, the wonderful marketing of it, and then the devastating aftermath of actual Goodreads reviews of the book itself and what we can learn from that as independent authors. So if you're interested in all that, just keep on watching. Yeah, so let's get into it. Audra Winters, she's a 22-year-old debut author, although that's a little contested. She's been working on this books series for many, many years. She's 22. She started this series when she was 12. She claims to have self-published her first book at like 14 and then I guess deactivated that. She claims that during her teenage years, she was querying the same book that The Age of Scorpius, in its earlier inceptions, consistently queried, didn't get anything back on that. She signed on with a literary agent later on and was signed with them for 3 years. And then ultimately, there's some conflicting data on that. She parted ways with her literary agent. But in one video, she claims that she left on her own accord because of creative differences. And then another video, she mentions that she was dropped by her literary agent for refusal to adjust the manuscript in some way. I don't know if that was an issue of editing or what, but that will come up again soon. That's what happened. So now they're 22. They make the decision to go indie and self-publish this book, and they marketed their process, not really their process. They marketed this idea of a book on TikTok and did very, very well. I mean, even I got some of their videos pushed to me initially because, again, I'm on TikTok, and although I need to get better at actually posting on TikTok because, like, I don't. I ran across a couple of videos herself because I do follow some other authors on there, and I have author content on there. So I've seen their face a couple times, but I never really fully engaged with them because something felt off to me, and I don't know what it was. And maybe that was just like my intuition telling me that like something's about to come. So basically, the video I saw and the videos that are most likely to get pushed out are her talking about the premise of the book. So this is a fantasy series that's inspired by zodiac signs. Well, it turns out that this person built quite a following over TikTok and ended up selling 6,000 pre-orders of this book before it even came out. And that is a huge feat in itself. Like I am not trying to detract from that. That's amazing. They did this in a couple of ways. There wasn't really a lot of videos on the content of the books itself. I don't even think people really knew the names of the main characters of the books. They just kind of knew the premise of it. But she marketed herself as somebody who was already destined to be financially successful. She talked about all paying artists and all the art that's going to go into the book. She showed snippets of the art. People fell in love with that. She talked about having like a beautiful cover. She talked about even having her own like entertainment studio, investing in her business that way. And again, I just want to highlight the word business here. She talked about investing in her business that way and hiring like a team of animators. And when she did refer to the book, she talked about having different writing groups look it over, and she talked about having different editors, and notably one editor that also worked on The Hunger Games. Now, when you hear that, your mind is automatically going to associate the two, right? Oh, this person worked on The Hunger Games, then this book is going to be at the same level as The Hunger Games. Like that's what's implied, and that's the point of marketing yourself that way, right? When the books first started to ship, they immediately started getting really, really negative reviews. I think on Goodreads, they've taken the page down since then, but at the time before it was taken down, and I'll correct myself if I'm wrong because I'm trying to remember, but at the time before it was taken down, it received a 1.7 star rating, which is rough. It's very, very rough. A lot of the negative comments directly responded to the quality of writing in the book. There was a lot of typos, a lot of spelling errors, a lot of misusage of words, basically a lot of copy edits that just weren't there. And for some folks, it made the book quite unreadable. There was also people who criticized the plot, character development, too much exposition, which again is something like, I'm gonna be so for real. I tend to fall into that trap when I'm writing my first draft and having a lot of exposition, but that's something you work out as you edit. And editing is an important step. So basically, people were complaining about that. From the videos I've seen, the comments I've read, I don't think anybody's been particularly nasty. I mean, obviously, there could be some exceptions to that I'm not seeing, of course. But overall, but I don't think people are being really nasty. But the author herself has responded to this criticism in a bit of a questionable way. They just kind of keep going on and on and on about the passion they have for this project and this book series. I kind of started smelling some things when in some of her previous videos she talked about how defensive she gets of her world and her art, and I was like, oh, that's red flag number one. And I only say this from personal experience, right? As an indie author, as somebody else who started self-publishing or started writing relatively young, I know what it feels like to be very emotionally invested in your work and initially is resistant or defensive or emotional about receiving critical feedback. It's something you have to grow out of, and because you are not the end all be all of knowledge, or it's very easy, like even when you're reading your own manuscript over and over and over again, it's so easy for you to miss things because you're just so used to seeing stuff, like you're so used to seeing the same sentences over and over, that you really either need to step away from it and come back, or you need to put it down, have somebody else look at it, and then come to you with that. And like sometimes people will see things that you've read a million times over and it'll be a dumb mistake and you're like, oh my god, why didn't I see that? Sometimes you can't because your brain is just too stuck on the thing itself. So yes, so when I heard her talk about how defensive she is about edits, I knew, I was like, uh-oh, this is somebody who's not going to listen, because I used to be a person similar to that. I used to be a bit of a control freak. I'm a recovering control freak. I am a perfectionist who got really emotional for criticism. So I understand where they've been, and I can empathize to an extent. I know that they're also pretty young. They're 22. 22 is still an adult, but I remember what I was like at 22 and I was insufferable. So I'm not throwing shade, but I'm just being completely honest, right? I remember what it was like being 22, and as much as I didn't want to admit it at the time, and now that I'm 30, I can look back and be like, yeah, 22-year-old me was really just like running on confidence and adrenaline, and probably could have learned to slow down a bit, which I think would have helped this author a lot too. Yes, so all the negative reviews were mostly about editing content, and people were confused and a little bit disappointed because this person had promised to have worked with so many editors and did these things. So people must have came to the conclusion that, yeah, maybe she hired these people and maybe they just didn't listen to the edits or get any feedback, and they were just using that as like a marketing tactic to be like, see, I worked with these people, I got feedback, but then I just chose not to do it. It's really hard because this person kind of contradicts themselves sometimes in these videos out of all the ones I've seen, and so it's hard to get a genuine sense of like what's going on. There's some people who have said that this seems like a bit of a scam or a marketing ploy, and to the extent where people are like demanding refunds for the book just because the quality is not what was expected. I have mixed feelings about that. As an indie author, like I feel like you guys should know that when you return a book, that like actively takes money out of an indie author's pocket. I've had somebody return one of my books recently, and I was like, what? It like literally really broke me. I was like, oh no, even though it was just one book. And I'm being dramatic. But what happens is they take that money out of your sales for the month, right? So I lost money from that. So just keeping that in mind, if you're somebody who wants to return books, maybe you don't have the shelf space, or maybe you just hate a book or something, just keep that in mind, because that's how that affects the author. And if you care about that, great. If you don't care about that, okay. But I thought I would just let you know. So that sucks. I understand people's complaints because the way they marketed this book, they were expecting one thing and it wasn't. But like also, I've read books where I thought I had higher expectations going in, and I've been disappointed by a book, and I've never returned it. So I don't know. For me, it's a mixed bag, especially with books, because there's no guarantee you're actually going to like a book when you read it. I don't think most people return books. That's why I'm a big advocate for the public library, because you can read as many books as you want, and if you don't like them, you can just give them back to the library, and you didn't have any financial investment into that, and it's fine. So when in doubt, if you're unsure about a book, maybe try requesting it through the public library first before investing money into it. People have been talking about how this book really needs to be edited. They've come back and been they've been doing something that I feel really icky about. When critiqued about overall exposition, grammar mistakes, spelling mistakes, she doubled down and said that that was the intentional voice for her main narrator. She claiming that her narrator is neurodivergent, so that they are going to just info dump, and that's why there's so much exposition, or that they're neurodivergent, so they're not going to speak perfectly every single time. They're going to have grammatical mistakes. Even when people are speaking to each other, sometimes people fumble over their words or use the wrong word. So in order to make this a realistic experience, this is what they did to justify so many just overall editing mistakes in the book. I find this offensive. Just for clarification's sake, I am somebody who's being treated for bipolar 2 disorder. I take medication. So I am neurodivergent as well. And yes, my brain works differently than most people's. And I recognize that now as an adult. And it might have explained some things that were especially hard for me as a young person, but now that I fully understand what's going on, I can learn how to cope or how to adjust, and things are great. Or I just also want to add on that I had a recommendation from my psychiatrist to get tested for autism as well, just based on some health records I had as an infant that would indicate that, but I haven't gotten tested by a professional yet. I'm not one who believes in like labeling yourself. I'd rather have an expert talk to me and really see if my experiences are valid. And I know people don't like that, but for me, it's just hard because so much of bipolar just symptoms kind of overlap with autism. So for me, I feel like I need a professional to help weed through that. That's just my opinion. So it's been recommended for me to get tested for autism. I have not done so yet. At the time when she brought that up, RFK Jr. was like talking about putting autistic people on funny farms. And I was like, maybe I should wait. Maybe I should wait on that. So yeah, as somebody else who's neurodivergent myself, granted it's not a monolith experience, but I found that to be kind of insulting because there's so many neurodivergent artists and writers and creators who put out phenomenal work and don't necessarily use that as a crutch for their mistakes. And again, her experience could be different from mine. I'm not the end all be all, obviously, but for me, it just felt kind of lazy and deflective. There's a lot of people nowadays that like to weaponize mental health and use that whenever they're criticized. And it makes me feel icky. And I really don't like that. I think that's disgusting. Yes, your mental illness or your disability really does impact your life, but it doesn't eradicate you from, or it doesn't like protect you from criticism, period. And I think a lot of especially white people like to do that, where they weaponize some sort of marginalized identity that they might feel to shield themselves from critique and criticism. And I'm saying that as a white person. And it was so funny because I was like gossiping with my husband about this, and the first question he asked, he's like, "Was this a white woman?" And I was like, "Yes, sir." So yeah, I mean, it's an element to it, right? It's yeah. I'm just bringing that up, and I'm just saying, in my opinion, it feels icky. I don't want to invalidate this person's experience. Likewise, when faced with a lot of these criticisms, they often brought up the fact that they had issues in the past about, which again is a sensitive topic for me as well, having issues with having the motivation to keep on living, right? They were in a dark place, and this book and this series really motivated them to keep on trucking in a time where they just didn't feel like still being on planet Earth. Obviously, like that is like a huge thing to experience. It is very, very difficult. I know about those feelings myself, and I've watched my loved ones go through feelings like that too. And that's not something to be discredited whatsoever. But again, why is it only being brought up in the context of people criticizing you and claiming that you're being bullied when in reality they're just telling you that you spelled shit wrong? For me, it's also kind of like a weaponization of that. And I really, really don't like that. And I think that's really common to do for like influencers who are getting quote unquote canceled or whatever to talk about. And I don't want to invalidate anybody's experiences, because I'm sure what she's going through right now, especially with all this criticism, is very hard to hear, especially if you're a young person. And I'm not downplaying that. But I do think it's emotionally manipulative to try to get because her ultimate thing in these videos is trying to get people to stop. She claims like, oh, I'm neurodivergent, so you just don't understand my voice or my perspective. I had issues with suicidal ideation, and therefore this is the only thing that's ever kept me going, so therefore you cannot criticize it because it is that important to me. And then 3, she also started weaponizing like the indie author community, being like, oh, we shouldn't tear each other down, we should lift each other up because all these corporations are against us and AI is against us and like all this kind of stuff, which I agree with. But again, somebody giving you gentle critiques and like giving you advice for areas to improve is not the same as tearing you down. Like people aren't just like, because this has happened to other folks, other marginalized folks, where people literally just review bomb them because of like racism or whatever. And that actually happens. But like you putting out a bad book and then people responding to it is not the same as people tearing you down. And again, I think it comes with a level of audacity where you don't want to be criticized. And this has been a consistent emotional pattern from the get. Because if you actually listen to your editors, you would have made these changes. But no, there was like some emotional audacity happening at that level. And it's just carrying forward. And that's why a lot of people are upset, because they feel like this author isn't taking criticism or really growing. They've claimed to be a master of their craft because they've been working on this. They quote somebody who said that like it takes 10,000 hours to be a master at something. I just want to give a little bit of pushback on that, because like, sure, you can work on something for 10,000 hours, but if you're not like changing and taking lessons from what you've learned and improving, then that 10,000 hours is just wasted. I am so sorry. You can write so many drafts and revise something and change it, but if it's ultimately remaining stagnant because you don't want to give and take when something could be a mistake, that is wasted time. And I'm coming off really emotive and like, at least I think so, really critical of this, but that's just honestly how I feel. So, okay, that's the whole thing. Now, people are demanding refunds. She's pushed back, but now she's at this point where she wants to re-release the book, and she is going to take maybe a couple months for edits, which honestly should be longer. With the amount of work that's going into this book, she's going to take some additional months to edit. She wants to have a new editor. She wants to hire a new editor from somebody in her reader community and have them audition for it. Now, girl, you need somebody who's going to give you tough love. You don't need somebody who's going to kiss your ass. And I think that's a lot of, because I'm only speaking from experience and growth. Okay, I'm only being critical because I too was in this spot when I first started out. If you only listen to people who are praising you, you are not going to grow. You have to listen to, and that's just like not just writing, but like anything. If you're only taking advice from people who want to coddle you, or people who are like, yeah, sweetie, you're great, go get them, that's not how you make your work better. And the likelihood of a passionate reader doing that for her is increased. She should really hire at this point, even if she doesn't want to hire a professional editor because maybe she can't afford it, although she claims to be making so much money from her business or whatever, fine, but like at least hire somebody that you know that is going to give you some tough love. In addition to that, she's really emphasized, again, adding more art, adding special, like, what are they called, foiled pages, or like, you know, when the book has like sprayed edges or like designs on the edges of the books. She wants to do that. She's talking about new cover art, new art, all this stuff, and people in her comments are like, girl, that's not what we want. We just want something that's legible, like readable. Like, I'm just coming from another indie author, and she might not want to take my opinion because honestly, she has sold more books than me. So go off, queen. But like, again, it's about reputation when it comes to your craft and the love of the craft. And I just personally don't see it there. And so this is going to, after this long-winded breakdown of what happened, and again, you can double check, fact check me. I'm going to list other videos down below of other people covering this story or like critiquing this person. So it's not, yeah. Okay. So now let's go into what I really want to talk about this video, which is about wanting to be an artist versus wanting to be an entrepreneur, wanting to be a writer versus wanting to be an entrepreneur, because this is not the first case I've seen of people doing this. When I lived in Boston, I met up with this other author that I found online. Because they lived in the same area as me. And so we met up and started doing stuff together, trying to sell books, going from bookstore to bookstore, trying to sell on consignment. We had some stock in their car and we were doing that. It was a fun time. But this person, I quickly found out, had a very different perspective from me in a lot of things. And also when it came to being a writer. I do not talk to this person anymore. I just don't think our values really align, and they presented themselves one way to me digitally and another way in person. So that being said, they from what I understood is that they had the sci-fi novel and they were very passionate about it. They were really focused on the world building of it and coming up with art and accompanying pieces to the story rather than talking about the story itself or the plot. And they were also had similar aspiration of having like a multimedia studio. They had a podcast. They just kind of, in my opinion, were putting the cart before the horse, if that makes sense. And I've noticed that people who come from a business background or a business mindset tend to do this more so than people who genuinely love writing. And I'm not trying to say Miss Audra Winters doesn't love writing, because she's very vocal and claims she does. And this has been a hobby and passion of hers for years and years and years. But there is, you can kind of tell when you meet people like this that they're more concerned about the brand and the world building and the idea than they are like the actual experience of writing something. You know what I mean? I myself have multiple projects ideas. Granted, my first book, Curse Face, was something I started as a 19-year-old, right? So a teenager. And I put that out, and it might not be my best work, like, truthfully. I mean, I've had some people who read it and love it, but like, again, I can recognize that, like, when looking back, that book probably had flaws with it, but it's reflective of where I was at the time. And I'm not trying to market myself as some grandmaster or like the next Hunger Games. Since then, I have written more books and more short stories and more projects, and I'm working on things, but I'm putting my hand in a lot of things because I enjoy writing different stories and writing different things. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't just I'm not saying that you can't put all your focus on one thing, but I think when you do that, you lose opportunities to experiment with your own writing and get better. And sometimes, like I said, when you see something for too long, you stop seeing the flaws and you become blinded by things. So I really recommend to other writers to just, if you're getting really, really involved in a project and you're feeling frustrated and stuck, to just like literally put it down and write some gobbledygook for a day, like random stuff, and then come back to it, right? You don't even have to be like, oh, I have to plan on my next book. No, literally just write gobbledygook. Just talk to yourself on the computer or something, because that will help you break out of this. So anyway, but yeah, I've noticed that a lot of people with business background, because my acquaintance that I was talking about came from a business background. I believe they have this in mind where they're going to have like a multimedia experience and be like the next Star Wars or something like that. Like in terms of like an indie studio like George Lucas did, or like a Studio Ghibli type thing. And from Audra Winters' TikToks, it was very apparent that she had this on her brain too. She wanted to make an animation studio based off of her world building, not necessarily her writing, because the first step is to put out the book to even see if people like it. So she was making all this like financial investment to build up a studio to give herself street cred and to fulfill some dream of hers, without putting in the actual work and craft of putting out a good story, right? And she claims that like storytelling is her passion, but even in her TikToks, most of them were about marketing. Nobody knew. Like, she didn't read any pages as examples. She didn't talk about the plot. She didn't talk about the characters. She didn't talk about like, you know, the characters' personalities, their relationships to one another. Nada. And I saw one comment on this, and I found it really interesting. It was from somebody else who's autistic, because you know, she uses the word special interest quite a bit. They said, like, for themselves, if there's something is their special interest, they want to talk about it all the time, like unnecessarily so, to the point where other people might get annoyed about it, right? You would think that if the story itself is her special interest, she would talk about that more so than like the marketing of it. So it might be that she has this like special interest or desire, really strong desire to be a famous author, and not as much as like the writing process, which I thought was interesting. That was an interesting perspective. And again, this is like only speculation. Like, I don't know this person personally, but I thought that comment was an interesting take. So I just wanted to include it here. It's this idea of artist versus entrepreneur, and like, how do you distinguish that? And like, I'm not saying that I think realistically, if you're an indie artist or an indie author, inevitably you do become like an entrepreneur against your will. I know I'm trying to get better. Like, girl, I have a spreadsheet now for sales. So look at me go that my husband helped me with. But there's some things you have to take from business people to just make sure that your writing can be sustainable, right? And for artists, sometimes we lack those skills. And sometimes, yeah, I wish I was more of a business person. I wish I was better at marketing. I would hire Miss Audra Winters to market my stuff in a heartbeat. I really would, because she was so successful with it. And she's young, and she has so much potential for that, right? And I know that's probably not what she wants to do, but damn, was she really good at marketing? It was, I'm giving her flowers. It was amazing. She got so much attention on her books. Selling 6,000 pre-orders is not an easy feat, especially if this is like your first book. Like, some people are saying, because they remember the shit that like Kylie's lip kits used to do and some makeup gurus used to do. Some people have been like, well, maybe she's putting out like a really bad first book so that she can resell this new book for a higher price, mind you. The updated art and sprayed edges and all that shit is going to be like $40 with only a couple months worth of edits. People are thinking she's pulling a Kylie lip kit thing, like what the beauty gurus used to do, where they would release a product and like it would have a bad batch or something, and they'd be like, oh no, and then they'd release a better product later just to get the buzz. That's why people are calling her a little bit like a scammy marketing technique. I don't know if that's true or not. If it is, she's really smart to do that at 22, I guess. But again, I think she generally tried. Like, I really do think she generally wanted to put out a book. I just think she had the hubris that like kept her from achieving her goal. That's basically what it is. So again, my thing is like, I do think authors need to learn lessons from people like Audra Winters, or from people that like I referenced, like the person I knew, where we need to understand business in a sense so that we can keep putting out more work, eventually have enough money to like sustain ourselves. Like, that's ultimately the goal, right? When anyone wants to be an author. So in order to do that, yeah, it helps if you market your books, right? It helps if you put your face out there. It helps if you have spreadsheets. It helps if you keep track of all the books you sell at like different vending events and stuff. All that's helpful when you have that sort of strategic mindset. But I don't think you should let that overtake the art itself. And I think that's Miss Audra Winter's problem, is she's letting all that overtake the art itself. And ultimately, you just can't build an audience that way. Like, if her goal is to build an audience of readers who are genuinely connect with her and like her stuff, you have to give them something worth reading. You have to give them something of value, right? And yeah, it's a lot of work. And yeah, that's probably going to take a long time to do. Like, I've been doing this. I've my first book was published in 2021, but then I stepped away with that publisher and republished it myself in 2023. So I've been doing this for like 4 years. And listen, I've been learning a lot on the fly, and there's been a lot of fumbling and mistakes in between. And again, I'm coming to her as somebody who cares, because I remember being in the same spot. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm actually trying to be helpful. And I remember going through all that stumbling, but like that was so needed, because where I am now compared to when I first started out is like a night and day difference. Night and day difference in terms of like how my confidence in my craft. I have a sustainable writing process now. I feel more confident addressing different projects. I feel more confident in experimenting with new things. And I just don't think she's there yet. And it's not an age thing. It's just, when you start out, you're not going to know everything. And I think for her and for other people like her, there's this obsession. I mentioned this in other videos. There's this obsession with being like a young prodigy or a child prodigy, especially when it comes to writing. And if you look back, like with the Hunger Games, I believe Suzanne Collins was pretty young when she put that out. I don't remember how old she was, but I'll look it up. But during that time, there were some child prodigies in publishing. But at the end of the day, like, everyone's journey is going to look different. You might not be a child prodigy, and that's okay. You don't need to have instant success. You don't need to have instant fame. And I don't know if that's like a instant gratification social media thing, or if that's just something that's been around for a long time. But I feel like people don't recognize that, like, yeah, this takes years. Writing takes years. Publishing takes years. And you would think she would know that, because she constantly talks about spending 10 years to write this book. But she started when she was 12. And so your writing voice at 12 should not be the same as your writing voice when you're 22. Your writing voice at 22 is not going to be the same as your writing voice when you're 42. The idea is to expand and grow with your age and experience, right? Your writing is meant to grow with you. And she's not giving herself a chance to let it grow if she wants to keep everything in the same sort of state as it was when she was a teenager. You just can't do that. I love my younger self. I appreciate her so much. But the stuff she's putting out is different than the stuff I'm putting out now. And that is totally okay. Like, I love and acknowledge her, but this is a new me. This is like something else. I wish that she has the opportunity. I want her to have the opportunity to do so. If she continues to pursue writing, I want her to have that same growth and appreciation of growth. And I really want the best for her. I really do. I want her next book, if she decides to do it, to be more successful than this one, you know? Supporting indie authors looks like that. It's, hey friend, let me reel you in and give you some and reel you in and let you know. But at the end of the day, like, let you know if you're doing something wrong. But at the end of the day, I still want your success and I want you to grow from this, right? It's not blind loyalty. It's not blind praise or constant praise. Sometimes you need tough love. And like, honestly, you need that in your personal relationships too. Sometimes you need tough love. If something's going on, somebody needs to call you out. And I just don't think people do that anymore. Or if they, I don't know, business people, work on your craft. Artist people, maybe learn a little bit from the business people about how to market yourself. And then maybe we'll meet in the middle and like all be funky and like get along, I guess. But until then, I just, yeah, until then, it's going to be rough. There's always going to be business people that come off as scammy because they're not willing to put in the work to work on their craft. And that's why I think AI art is so appealing to so many businessy type people, because it skips over the craft part. But like, if you ask an artist about like how they feel about AI or like how they approach their craft, they're going to be like, but the making of it is the fun part, right? The making of it is it's grueling and sometimes it's difficult and thankless, but at the end of the day, that's the part you don't want to give up, you know? And that's the part that's actually enjoyable. And the marketing put stuff and the reader feedback can also be wonderfully fulfilling and great, but like, you can't get there if you don't put in the work. Like, the part where I love, if a reader comes up to me and says, I like your shit, the reason why that's so impactful to me is because I spent so much time working on it. Because I spent so much time like wondering if this is good or not, and like banging my head against the wall and rewriting, revisiting, getting feedback that sometimes can be like hurt, like painful, because I don't want to change something, and then doing it anyway and realizing somebody else was right, and sometimes that sucks. But it's necessary. So yeah, when you get rid of that part, then there's no fun part at the end when you actually sell it. And that's why it feels so hollow, and like, that's why it feels so fake and businessy, and why people are accusing you of being a scammer is because they don't get to see the craft part. And a lot of people like the craft part. Every now and then I'll post videos of like my growing word counts, right? And they might not go viral, but I always get comments of people congratulating me, being like, oh yeah, queen, you made it this far, awesome. Or like people I know being like, oh, this motivates me to do it. Or, you know, other people being like, oh, it makes me so happy to see you like putting in so much work. That's great. Like, that's part of it too. You know, I don't know. Like I said, I think this woman has a brilliant future ahead of her if she decides to go into entertainment marketing. Oh, I think she could kill it. But if she wants to continue being a creative, independent author and a good writer, she needs to let some of that ego go. I'm sorry, friend. You have to like let loose of the control. You have to take feedback from readers and editors and all this other stuff. It is literally just part of the process. And you can't skip over essential parts of the process just because it makes you feel uncomfortable. Because being an artist is constantly being uncomfortable. Being an artist is constantly like having a mixture of ranging emotions from glee to self-doubt to frustration, all this kind of stuff. Like, that's just, you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be, if you're vulnerable, you're going to be uncomfortable. And there's a difference in vulnerability being like, I'm talking about this work that I believe in and this is what it is. Because it's one thing to say like, oh, I'm marketing my book and now I have a 6-figure business and I'm so cool. That for me is defensive shields and convincing other people that you're great because you got some validation and now it's part of your identity to be great, right? There's another part that says, hey, I'm writing this story. I'm very passionate about it. It's a story that has this setting, this place, and these characters, and this is the plot. And that's letting people in, because once you say that, people might be like, well, I don't like the name of that character. I don't like the setting you chose. I don't like the plot. I think this is redundant. I think this has been done before. I don't think it's creative. When you show the story, that's when you're being vulnerable, right? But you need to do that in order to put out a good quality book. And she didn't allow herself to have that moment of vulnerability. When you skip extra steps and you just want to get to the good part, it's not going to work out the way you think. You know what I mean? It's not going to work out the way like you really imagine. So this is kind of like my plea to anybody who's like watching this video. Please take like her experience as a lesson for yourself. The lesson from this isn't, it shouldn't be, oh, I never want to write because I never want to mess up that bad. Like, I don't want to mess up like Audra Winters did. I don't want to do so. No, the lesson is that is not, do not try. If anything, it's try harder, right? If you're a young person and you want to be an independent author and you want to put your stuff out there, but you're afraid of like blowback like that, I would just say that like, okay, well then make sure that like you are working extra hard on your book and on your writing, that you're constantly like looking at yourself with a critical eye, even if you can't afford like a professional editor, because like I couldn't afford a professional editor either when I was starting out. At least give your book to people that you know won't bullshit you. Bullshit you. Give it to people that might also be working on something, like other writers that might have that eye, or give it to like a reader that you really trust, that somebody you know has read a lot of books and kind of has a good sense of story. Like anybody, right? Anybody just with a perspective different than your own, because it's very easy for us to get married to our own work and not really recognize it as it is, right? So yeah, if you're a young person seeing this, please don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged by this story or this drama stuff. Please just like, again, just take this lesson and be like, oh shit, maybe I need to take a little bit extra time to practice before I put something out. And even if you put something out too early, you can always take it down, change it. You can always adjust the feedback, you know. But for this person, if I was speaking to Miss Winters specifically, I would just be like, let me hold your hand, friend. I know this is rough. I know this is going to feel rough for a while now. And I know it can feel like people are attacking you personally. And some people might well be, some people might be nasty, and maybe I didn't see that. But there's people with really good intentions here. And the criticism that you're receiving actually is pretty tame compared to some other things that have happened in the past. So I would use that grace that people are giving you and give them a reason to believe in you, right? Do the right thing, work on your craft, because you won't be able to change their minds by just telling them to stop saying what they're saying. You have to show it. People believe in actions. People don't believe in words, right? You have to show them that you're willing to grow and change. And then people will believe in you again, because everybody makes mistakes. And that's true. Everybody makes mistakes. But it's more so like how we react at our lowest is what says the most about our character, more so than just, I don't know, like just continuing down the same path and doing the same things and expecting a different result. Yeah. So sorry, that's been my pretty long, kind of ranty drama recap slash author advice at the end. I had this idea that this video would be a lot more monotone and precise, but then it just kind of derailed into me getting heated. I hope it was still worth it for you guys. I hope you learned something from this or you enjoyed this. If you did, please like the video, comment down below, share this with a friend, and subscribe to the channel. Please, please, please. My goal for this year is to hit 1,000 subscribers, and we're almost there. So that would mean a whole lot to me. And until next time, thanks. Bye.